Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conspiracy Monday, where we are talking about the possibility of Obama's
under investigation
love
right
child.
now. But again, there were certain things that
Let's
were
take a
going
look at
on
a
more
story
than
coming
she
in
had
from
been on some medications, but that she had
CNN.
stopped taking those medications. Think about it. She actually packed a bag, strapped her daughter in that car, and then drove hundreds of miles down to the White House, possibly to get an audience with the president, Jake.
Really?
Strange. Deb, we heard about an envelope outside Miriam Carey's apartment addressed to her boyfriend. What can you tell us about that? What's the latest on that?
Well, this was an envelope. What's interesting is that apparently, according to a source, there was no actual letter in the envelope. There was some sort of a substance inside, a sugary substance, and it was near the door, actually. And so hazmat teams were able to take the letter, bring it to a Connecticut state lab, where that is undergoing testing now. And authorities couldn't even get in to search the apartment because they had to make sure that it was, in fact, safe. So.
Okay, that is where they were at yesterday. Let me bring you up to speed as to what's happening today. Thank you to the work of a person who copied this video and closed in on it and made some strong effort to show us that there were two people in the car that Marion sped away with when she was being in pursuit by the police. And I'm going to give you guys a good picture of these two heads behind me as she sped away. I'm going to show you this over and over again so you get a good chance to see that the heads are clearly not headrests in this very expensive Infiniti car. You can see that right there. Some of these shots are very distinctive heads. You see that two people were there. I'm going to play you audio from this clip at the beginning where the Connecticut News 3 eyewitness news team actually reported that there was a passenger in the car and that person was arrested. Yet for some reason that has not hit the mainstream media. That's been completely shunned and kept away from the American public. I'm going to play this for you right now. Let's take a look.
Black Infiniti with that woman. That person, we are being told, is now in police custody. Was a second person that was inside that black Infiniti with that woman. That person, we are being told, is now in police custody. Was a second person that was inside that black Infiniti with that woman. That person, we are being told, is now in police custody.
Okay, they played it over and over again so that you have a good chance to see it, hear it for clarity purposes, but they originally announced that this person was with someone else. Now let me give you some background as to what this is all about. It's worth noting that she was definitely being treated for postpartum depression, but her family said that she'd been off her meds and was doing perfectly fine. That was the original story that they said in the news. Her child apparently has been taken into foster care. It begs the question, why wasn't the child offered to the sisters as an alternative to help lower her stress level? But she's in foster care. We don't know what's going to happen with that. The question is, why did this woman not just once but repeatedly go to the White House and try to see the president? People in the area said they saw this black Infiniti in front of the White House numerous times. Many people in the neighborhood said, eyewitnesses said that the vehicle had been there multiple times almost every weekend to try to see the president. And it was this weekend, last weekend I should say, that she ended her life, essentially. Why was there a second person? Why were they arrested? Why does the mainstream media not cover the second person? Clearly you can see two heads in that car. Was there a connection? Because Marion was very forthright about her views and kind of felt like she knew a lot. She also told people she was the prophet of Stanford, the person who knew a lot of things, and she claimed she was being watched by the president. Well, it's interesting, the timeline here. The baby would have been conceived about 2 years ago, right around the time that Barack Obama and Michelle Obama had visited with her sister, who was a person who has developed a foundation to protect women with premenstrual syndrome, PMS. Her sister, who was the spokesman on all the news channels who spoke out about her sister being killed, actually was a former sergeant of the Brooklyn Police Department in New York. And she is a person who is reading off a teleprompter, people say. And it was kind of strange to see her sister reading off a teleprompter when asked about Marion's loss of life. In any event, The Obamas did fund and support the sisters' efforts to stop PMS in women, and Miriam's diagnosis of post-traumatic stress syndrome was a small diagnosis. It wasn't a major chronic schizophrenia problem. The news we're listening to, like CNN, is talking about how she had psychiatric prescriptions found in her home, etc., etc. But according to her sisters, she wasn't taking those meds at all. And many people would say, well, of course, she wasn't taking her meds. She probably flipped out. She probably got crazy and she ripped out of there, and she deserves to die, according to these people. Well, I've talked to people who are ethicists who believe that she should never have put the child in danger by taking the child with her and in violating the police that were standing there trying to stop the vehicle. There are those people that are talking about that. Other people are talking about the police and how they've behaved in this matter, shooting a woman, virtually hunting her down. Because the moment that shooting occurred, that's not where Miriam died. She died down the street. Cameras weren't there to see her actually being shot. But there was a passenger. News team, Eyewitness News 3 said that there was a passenger that was arrested at the time, but no mention of that in the mainstream media. So one has to assume that she has essentially a bigger story about her. Now, let's go deeper into that, okay? In around 2000, she got her license to practice as a dental hygienist. She had some problems in her neighborhood in Brooklyn. She was kicked out. She was sent, basically they took her license away because they said she was rough with patients in New York, but she reapplied for a license in Connecticut and got a job for a while and then was out of work for the past year. And people say that she used to walk around in her green scrubs, you know, the kinds that you normally see a dental hygienist in, even though she wasn't working. So that begs the question, how does a woman who wasn't working afford a very nice condominium in Stamford, Connecticut, and somehow have money to pay off a debt that she had with her community fee due, that was due in around February? She paid off a $2,000 debt, and she was paying about $600 a month to lease that Infiniti, that new Infiniti that she was driving around in. So how does a woman like that have money? Well, the more and more you think about it, the more you realize that it's very possible that she was a kept woman. Now, neighbors of hers in the Stamford, Connecticut area said that they frequently saw a red Cayenne Porsche SUV pull up in front of her house and pick her up. And they always thought and assumed that that was the father of this child. Now, mind you, the current boyfriend is not the father. He's an older man who doesn't take credit for being the father of this little baby girl. But I can tell you that the whole thing seems like Miriam was going to the White House on a regular basis, claimed that she was being watched and supervised by Obama directly. Many people would think, well, that's absurd. That's illogical. Well, not really, in the framework of the fact that her sister, who was involved with the Obamas in fundraising, knew the Obamas, and probably could have had a liaison with the Obamas. You never know, and Miriam may have met Barack Obama. I'm just pontificating here that this child may very well have been related, and she may have been trying to take the child to Barack Obama. She was obsessed with Barack Obama. The other theory is she's a total whack job, and she was just on meds and she completely freaked out and she had some sort of delusion that Obama was watching her. But that doesn't answer the question, why were there two heads in this picture behind me? It doesn't in any way broach the real issue as to why is the news, the mainstream media, covering up the fact that they arrested a second person. That alone shows me that there's something very strange about this entire story. It's not adding up. The fact that she was paying for a nice place and a nice car with no money coming in. She supposedly had a business where she was trying to hook other dental hygienists up with jobs, an employment opportunity business of some sort. That wasn't panning out. It's highly unlikely that this woman had enough cash to pay for both the car and the apartment and the trips to DC, for that matter. I mean, this girl was dealing with some major issues in her life, granted. Did she deserve to die at the hands of police brutality? No. Was she alone in the car? No. Why is the media covering up the fact that she was not alone in the car? There's got to be something more to the story. So you take that, think about it, mash it up in your brain, say, maybe there is a connection between a loved child. Who knows? But the bottom line is, from my perspective, is I am looking at nothing but questions. Now, these aren't the only questions I'm looking at. Across the country, there's questions about issues far and beyond this situation in D.C. with this woman, this poor woman who died. There's issues that stretch way deep into the background of what happened at Sandy Hook, for instance. What happened at the Boston Marathon massacre that occurred that is so hush-hush that the government doesn't even want anyone to talk about it. Sandy Hook hasn't even delivered a single police report on what occurred there with the supposed shooting of Adam Lanza's shooting of 22 innocent children and various people at the school. No police report to this day. So that's a huge red herring out there if you're wondering what the heck's going on. With the Tsarnaev brothers, the younger one that's still facing trial, pleading not guilty, everybody who knew him pleading not guilty. One of their friends, the friend of the older brother, has actually been executed, a gunshot to the back of his head. His father showed that picture on the internet for all to see, that his son was shot 7 times. One was a shot to the back of his head. That's an execution style killing. That's a question that still remains. What's going on? Why did we see civilian support teams running around at that event at the Boston Marathon? That begs the question, why were these people in the SUV with the special clothing and the backpacks there on their cell phones when they weren't even first responders? They didn't even help people that were hit by the bombs that blew off at the Boston Marathon attack. There are so many issues here that are not being answered, and then you go even farther into this whole thing and you keep running into these stories that pop up, like John Holmes thing that hasn't, James Holmes, that hasn't been adjudicated. James Holmes, who was the supposed Aurora, Colorado shooter. Now there's evidence that he was posting in chat rooms that he was, would people visit him in prison before the actual shooting in Aurora, Colorado, and the prosecutor wants to use that against him in the case. Apparently, James Holmes won't even have a trial for another year. They're postponing that too. And we've got all these questions that still remain about that guy. Questions that are just not being answered in any capacity out there. When you look at the pictures that are in front of us, you wonder, well, how does this guy possibly match up with the real James Holmes, the guy who was actually the person who went to Riverside and got a 99.3% on his GPA, the guy farthest away from my face? That's the real James Holmes. The guy that's serving trial right now, closest to me, is the new James Holmes. Completely different face, completely different look. There's no evidence that he's actually the same person, yet the government isn't even answering these questions. No one's able to come to any grip with this question. You look at the nose is clearly different, the mouth is different, but the physical asymmetry of the eyes and the nose, that's all a good match. He's about a 91%, 86 to 91% match. That's not a 100% match for a person. So it's very likely this person was put in place to pull off this supposed false flag operation at the Aurora, Colorado shootings. And again, that trial won't even go forward for another year. They're postponing all of the reveal. The media doesn't cover any of these stories we're currently talking about. There's other issues too, like Adam Lanza, the supposed killer. This isn't a doctored photo, by the way. This is a Photoshop photo. This is not a real photo. This was produced in some government agency to create the illusion that this guy was scary. I'm going to show you some photos of him that are very natural and show you the real unaltered photo of Adam Lanza as a young boy. This is him. Not likely the photo of that elongated face, and it's made to look like a weird, freakish picture. I mean, I might as well show you a picture of a humanoid. You know, I might as well just put that there and say that, oh yeah, that was Adam Lanza. You know, you might want to believe that. Sure, we might as well say that was his picture. I mean, it's ridiculous. They are altering photos to make us fearful that these people are real, that they in fact existed. No one saw Adam Lanza for 3 years prior to his supposed day of reckless shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School. And as an antidote to this, I must remind you that they want to tear down the school, Sandy Hook Elementary. There's talk right now, serious talk, consideration of getting rid of the school itself, which is the only record we have of any event happening. Okay? If they want to get rid of the school, that means they want to level any record of a shooting taking place. What if the shooting never even took place? What if 22 kids never died? I mean, that's all a huge question. The fact is, they never allowed any of the parents to actually see their dead children. Not one of the parents of the 22 dead children in Sandy Hook got to see their parents. Okay? There's a gag order against any parents talking about it, yet 3 have come forward to talk about the horrible tragedy. Okay? There's a gag order at the Connecticut Police Department regarding this event as well. And again, no police report showing where the classroom was, where the spent gun bullet casings were. Nothing. No discovery whatsoever. So we know that all of these events belie a deeper problem. And then the specter of Benghazi. I talked about that tonight. What happened to the 31 CIA agents that were supposedly on the ground when Chris Stevens was killed? Ambassador Chris Stevens was killed. There were supposedly 31 agents on the ground. That story broke about 4 weeks ago. It's been completely suppressed. Right after it broke, there was a big, huge scare, a terrorist scare. Al-Qaeda was causing problems, and they shut down 21 embassies in around the world. And now, within 2 days, they opened the embassies up, and now that story about the CIA agents on the ground when Chris Stevens died is gone. Completely erased from the lexicon of stories out there about anything. So we don't know what happened. We don't have any real clue as to what really goes on in events like that. And of course, remember when the Senate subcommittee hearing investigated the Benghazi case, and they were going to interview General Petraeus and Hillary Clinton? Well, it turns out that story with General Petraeus, with the woman that he was supposedly dating at the time, her name was Paula. That story broke the day after, or the day before he was going to testify in front of the Senate subcommittee hearings on the Benghazi. And right after that, he was like a church mouse. He didn't say anything bad about anything. So he knew that they got his number. They figured out they were watching him and his girlfriend, and they've used that against him to shut him up. That's the theory. There's also a lot of other issues that are clearly hidden in the background of our recent history. There's the Abbottabad story. That story is a specter of problems. Look at the carnage resulting from the helicopter crash in Abbottabad, and tell me that Navy SEALs could have survived that crash. Tell me that somebody could have survived this crash. Seriously. There was only one major witness that tweeted at the time in Abbottabad the events that occurred, and they said there was only one large explosion. So there's no way they could have gotten rid of this helicopter after the fact with a secondary explosion. That story doesn't fly. The fact that we still don't have a picture of Osama bin Laden's dead body, again, that's a red herring. We still don't have a picture of his body being thrown off the Carl Vinson in white sheets. That's another red herring. We still don't have any actual DNA evidence. The government has yet to produce testable DNA evidence that Osama bin Laden was at Abbottabad. Well, this is another cover-up for an even bigger story that is an even bigger cover-up, and that is the birth certificate issue. This Abbottabad situation went down just about a week or two after the birth certificate issue came to a head with Donald Trump talking about Barack Obama's birth certificate. Remember when Donald Trump finally brought it up and was discussing where is the long-form birth certificate, and he's had credible information with his scientific research into Obama's background, and he's convinced that he's got fraudulent documents out there, including the Social Security document? Well, apparently Abbottabad was designed to cover up. It was originally set up to create the illusion that Obama was doing great capturing Osama bin Laden. It was moved forward in time to right after the birth certificate issue in order to bring Barack Obama's approval ratings up so that he could win the 2012 election. The theory is that he actually was working to quickly cover up any stories about the long-form birth certificate. Everything about that story is suspicious. I talked to Doug Vogt, the document expert, on my radio show, and you can listen to it in archive. If you click the radio icon on our main site, it's the fifth one down if you want to listen to it. Just like many people who've interviewed Doug Vogt, he actually is the preeminent expert on documents. He builds scanners here in Washington, and he's quite knowledgeable, very brilliant man. And he's absolutely convinced that the forged document was delivered in a timely manner in order to cover up any questions about Barack Obama's online birth certificate. But when he got there, when Doug Vogt got to the actual event in Washington, D.C., he brought a scanner. He was going to take a look at the actual document. Barack Obama's press secretary refused to present the document for scientific study. And it's an interesting note that Barack Obama never admitted to his long-form birth certificate on camera. He admitted to the incident of the online birth certificate being the legitimate document. Obama's never actually made any specific claim that the long-form birth certificate that was delivered from Hawaii to his attorney and brought to D.C. in 2011, right before the Abbottabad incident, Obama's never admitted that that was his. So he's protected legally because he never admitted to forging that document. Okay? This is a very, very delicate area, and his legal experts must have told him, don't admit that was your document, just talk about the online one. Well, that's all Barack Obama's ever talked about. So we still have a pending issue about the birth certificate, about his IDs, about his social security numbers that is still not sitting well with a large portion of the population. There's over 20% of the population still that believe that Barack Obama is a Muslim, that he's not born in this country, that he was born in Kenya. 20% of our population is still sitting out there. And you may ask yourself, why did Mitt Romney not bring this up? Why didn't he take Donald Trump's advice and at least open the question of Barack Obama's birth certificate? And it essentially lost the race for Mitt Romney, because he could have pulled 20% of the voters who are independent voters that probably would have voted for him if he at least said, let's at least question and look more into the authenticity of this birth certificate document. But he didn't even do that, and that validates the theory that Mitt Romney was a shill that was put out there to throw the race and give it to Barack Obama. There's so many issues here that have been covered up since Obama became president. The list goes on and on. I could actually run this show for 4 hours and still talk about cover-ups after cover-ups and very interesting, mysterious missing information and pieces to this puzzle. So if you're interested in watching more, always check our shows out every night, 6 to 9, and we'll be talking to you and chatting in real time with everybody on a regular basis. We don't miss a show now except for Sunday. Sunday is the only day we take a rest. We have an anti-war show rally on the Saturdays, and we keep pushing for anti-war because we know that Barack Obama's mandate is to start some sort of an event that will cover up the rampant printing of money by the Federal Reserve. And what they have done to our nation is bankrupt us. And they're looking for an excuse to pin the blame on some new event. So don't be surprised if you don't see another cover-up or false flag operation right before your very eyes on the mainstream media next week. Because they're getting very close to running out of money in Washington. And with the government shutdown in full swing, they're looking for somebody to name and blame or some event to name and blame because they're not willing to take responsibility for the real problem. And as you all know, I do support the government shutdown as long as it takes for Barack Obama to end this ridiculous Obamacare plan that is going to bankrupt this nation with $1 trillion of excess spending, an expansion of Medicaid, and an unnecessary waste of tax dollars to hire people to monitor and collect money from people, garnish IRS wages, go into bank accounts, take the profits from insurance companies. All that's going to have an infrastructure which is going to cost us $1 trillion minimum over 10 years, if not more, and is going to expand Medicaid. So yeah, we've got so many problems to talk about on a daily basis that our shows are ripe with information and talk and discussion to go back and forth on. I'll be back to the chat. We'll talk a little bit with people there, and thank you for watching. Appreciate it.